This is the classwork for factoring polynomials by grouping. So number one, written in factored form, 2x squared minus 13x plus 15 is equivalent to. Remember, the key is that you're looking at every term and there is no greatest common factor. And when there is no greatest common factor, what you do is you multiply a times c. And standard form, just to remind you, I put it up here, a squared, so 2 would be in the a spot right there, and b, which is the negative 13, and the c, which is the 15. Alright, so in this case you would multiply a times c. So it is 2 times 15, and I like that it's all positive. 2 times 15, and that equals 30. So once you have that number, 30, you can now look for two factors of 30, two factors that multiply to 30. Could be the same ones that you have, but usually not. But in this case, it looks like it is. So two factors that multiply to 30 and that add or subtract to negative 13. And 2 and 15 looks like that is the case. But let's see if that works out. So if I have 1 times 30, all right, that's my first, that's what I start with all the time. Then I go to 2 times 15. And 3 times 10. Right? You can even go 6 times 5, but I mean, you're going to use one of these. All right, because the 2 and the 15, you can make negative 13, and negative 3 and 10, you can also make a negative 13 by putting negative and negative. All right, so you're talking about a positive 30 that you have to go ahead and multiply to get to a positive 30. You have to go either positive times positive or negative times negative. Positive times positive or negative times negative. All right, remember, you are multiplying to a positive 30. You're multiplying to a positive 30, so it has to be those two. But you have to add or subtract to a negative 13, so it has to be negative and negative. All right, so I'm going to rewrite the 2x squared. I'm going to bring that down. And then instead of the negative 13, I'm going to put negative 3x and also a negative 10x. You notice that negative 3x and negative 10x equals the negative 13x. You didn't really change anything, you just split that up to create something that could add or subtract to that negative 13x. Now you could go ahead and take the greatest common factor of each section. So this part right here, you can kind of draw a dotted line going down, which you don't have to do, but this is the first half and this is the second half. So I'm going to get the greatest common factor of just the first half, and the greatest common factor of just the first half is x. So what times x equals 2x squared? 2x. What times x equals negative 3x? Negative 3. Then I take this part right here, the second half, and I'm going to get the greatest common factor. Change of, and put my parentheses down. So the greatest common factor that I'm looking at right now is, see, of 10 and 15 is 5. So I'm going to put that negative outside, and I'm going to put the 5 outside with it. Negative 5 times what equals negative 10x? Negative 5 times 2x equals negative 10x. You could always go by this. Like it should be where you have the parentheses. Inside the parentheses is going to be the same binomial. Negative 5 times what equals positive 15. Negative times a negative 3. So when you put this together, it's x minus 5. Take the two terms that are outside the parentheses, put them together in a binomial. And then you take the term, the binomial inside the parentheses, and that would be it. Your answer. Okay. Number 2, take a look. There's no greatest common factor, so what we're going to do is we're going to do 6 times negative 8. 6 times negative 8 is negative 48. All right, so now we have to look for factors of, I'm just going to put factors of 48. To multiply to a negative, though, you have to have a positive and a negative, right? You have to multiply to 48, negative 48, and you also have to add or subtract to a negative 8. So I'm just going to start with 1 times 48. 2 times 24. And when I say don't like sit there and like think about things, 48 divided by 3. That's not going to work. Oh, it is going to work. Nice. 3 times 16. Without my calculator, 48 divided by 4. Obviously, that is 12. So 4 times 12. I'm going to stop right there to see if that would work. 4 and 12, you can make 8, negative 8, if you put a negative 12 and a positive 4. That would be negative 8. You would add to that negative 8, and I think those are my factors because negative times a positive would be that negative. So I'm going to go with these factors right here. I can stop right there as soon as I get to the factors. So I am just going to go ahead and write down the 6r squared. I have my factors. And instead of the negative 8r, I'm going to put positive 4r and a negative 12r. And then I'm going to just write down that negative 8. So now I'm going to, again, put parentheses for the greatest common factor. 6 and 4. So 2 is the greatest common factor, and r is the greatest common factor. All right, 2r times what equals 6r squared? 2r times 3r equals 6r squared. 2r times what equals 4r? 2. So when I factor out over here, inside the parentheses should be the same binomial. Let's see. 12 and 8. 8 doesn't go into 12. 4 goes into 8 and 12, so we're going to put that 4 on the outside. 4 times what equals 12? R. Negative 4 times what equals negative 12R? This would have to be a 3R. Right here. 4 times 3 is 12, and then you bring that R. Negative 4 times what equals negative 8? And that is that. So you go ahead and you take the two terms that are outside the parentheses and make it a binomial. And then you take the term inside the parenthesis and make it a binomial. That is your answer, and you are finished. Any questions with that one? Okay, so number 3. First thing you do is look for a greatest common factor of 30, 8, and 6. So I see a greatest common factor there, and 30, 8, and 6, basically 2. Alright, and I am going to factor out a 2, and 2 times what equals 30, 2 times 15 equals 30. That W is going to stay squared, and then 2 times 4W, and then 2 times 3. Spread that out. And that's what we have. So taking a look at what we have here, now you have no greatest common factor that could be factored out there. You still have this, which is very difficult to factor right off the bat, so we're going to factor it by grouping. So we're going to do 15 times negative 3. And 15 times negative 3 is negative 45. So you have to look for factors that equal negative 45 when you multiply them, and then add or subtract to 4. Alright, so let's see how we can do this. So when you look for your factors, just count up from 1, see 1 times 45 just to get the ball rolling, and then 2 doesn't go into 45, you don't have to try it. Look at my calculator, what I did 45 divided by 3, I knew it was 15, 15 and 3 can't make a 4. Then, and I go to 9 and 5 and I stop there and I say, alright, so I could actually use this to make 4. Negative 4 would have to be a negative 9 and a positive 5. 5 minus 9 is negative 4. Positive 5 times 9 would be a negative 45. So it looks like I have my factors. It looks like I have my factors. So I'm going to copy down the 15W squared. Then instead of the negative 4W, I'm going to put plus 5W minus 9W. And then I'm going to copy down that minus 3. Then I'm going to just take this. I'm going to leave that 2 like out there, right? So the 2 stays out, and then I am going to factor out whatever. Remember, I was telling you about the first half and the second half, right? So I'm going to factor something out right there, the greatest common factor, and I'm going to use like a double parenthesis so I don't get confused. And actually, whatever I factor out is going to be multiplied. So instead of that, I'm just going to put double parentheses. And I'm going to factor out a greatest common factor between 15w squared and 5w. And 5w is the greatest common factor. And I'm going to put that double parenthesis, and you'll see exactly where this is going in a second. 5w times what equals 15w squared, and 5w times 1. What's that? And then I'm going to factor out a greatest common factor here. So I'm going to put the minus in the middle. And I'm going to factor out a 3 because 9 and 3, right? Greatest common factor of 3 and 9 is 3. And then I am going to do 3 times what equals 3w. And obviously that's 3w, 9w. Negative 3 times what equals negative 3. And that's a negative 1. Sorry, positive 1. Negative 3 times positive 1 equals negative 3. So this might look confusing to you, but it'll get less confusing. Leave that 2 out there. Bring this over here. This is going to be your answer. Then you take the terms outside the parentheses, the main parentheses. You have the 5w and the minus 3. And make that a binomial, just like you normally would. And then you take the binomial inside the parentheses and you make it a binomial, and you have your final answer right here. And that would be your answer. And that's your final answer right there. All right, so let's just take this one. It'll probably a little bit easier than that one. All right, so you have 5 times negative 12. And if you don't know what that is, 5 times a negative 12 in your calculator. And always use that calculator, so it's negative 60. So now you have to find two numbers that multiply to negative 60 and that add or subtract to negative 28. And 1 and 60, not going to do it. 2 and 30, not going to do it. Oh yes, wait a minute, we could stop there. We can make a negative 28 on that, about from 2 and 30. So it would have to be, and it also has to multiply to a negative, so one has to be negative and one has to be positive. So negative 30 and a positive 2 would do 2 minus 30 would equal negative 28. 2 times negative 30 equals negative 60. Those are my factors. So we could stop right there, and which is really good because you know, it's better than looking for all the factors. So taking a look at the when you set this up, move this down. So I'm going to copy down the 5m squared, and instead of negative 28, I'm going to put positive negative 28m. I'm going to put positive 2m and minus 30m. And then I'm just going to copy down the negative 12. To factor, I'm looking at just the first half right here, the first two terms, and I am going to factor out an m, because there is no greatest common factor between 2 and 5. So m times what equals 5m squared? M times 5m. M times what equals 2m? 2. Now this 5m plus 2 should be the same binomial that goes into, that is in these sets of parentheses in that second half, for the second half. So let's see if it is. To get the greatest common factor between 30 and 12, we need a number that goes the greatest number that goes into both. So 12 does not go into 30. 6 does go into both 12 and 30. So I'm going to put that on the outside, 6. Move this over because that's all that is. The 6 is the greatest common factor. 6 times what equals negative 30m? 6 times 5m. You notice that you have 5m here. And then negative 6 times what equals negative 12? 2. So, to get your answer, you put m and a minus 6, make that as one binomial, and the other binomial is 5m plus 2. And that's your answer. Number 5 and number 6. So right now, what I want you to do is press pause and see if you could do this on your own. We'll come back with those answers. So number 5 is this. You could just take a look at it, pause the video if you want to take a look at it. And that's basically it. Number 6, see 9 times 16 is 144, and that creates a problem because you have to get two factors that that multiply to 144, but then that add to negative 30, and that might be a little bit difficult. But I'm using my calculator, and I just want to show you. I'm just starting at 1. 1 times 144, 2 times 72, I'm putting 144 divided by 2 to get that 72. Then I did 144 divided by 3 and I got 48. This I still cannot make 30 out of. So I'm going to do 144 divided by 4 and see if that works out. And so this is 4 times 36. All right. So if I subtract um, 36 and 4, I'll get a 32. So that's not it either. So I can't make anything. So I know that 5 doesn't go into it to 144. So I'm skipping it 6. So let's see. 6. You see what I did with my calculator there? 144 divided by 6, 24. Like, I don't know that, but it's not something that I know by heart. So now 6 and 24, yes, you can make 30 out of that if both were negative. Negative 6 minus a 24. Negative 6 minus 24 is negative 30, and negative times a negative would be that positive. So that's basically how you would get that. And those are that's an example. Like number 6 is an example of factors that are a little bit more difficult, all right, to look for. So I'm going to put negative 6v and negative 24v instead of the negative 30, and I don't know why I'm putting v, p, and p. All right, and then I'm going to bring down that 16. So a little bit more difficult, but just don't sit there. You have your calculator. Start with 1, and then divide 144 by 2, then divide 144 by 3. You'll get there. It might take you a little bit longer, but you'll get there. All right, so now I am going to put my first set of parentheses, and I'm going to look for a greatest common factor that goes into 9 and 6. 3. And then P, they both have a P, so I'm going to take that P out as the greatest common factor. All right, so 3P times what equals 9P squared? It would have to be 3P. And then minus 3P times what equals 6P? That's 2. Just do 3 times negative 2 is negative 6, and you just bring along the P. Then you minus, and then you're going to look for a greatest common factor between 24 and 16. And that is 8. 8 goes into 16, 8 goes into 24. 3 times, and it would be 3P. And then negative 8 times what equals positive 16. Exactly the same thing as what you have. So you're going to make 2 binomials. One binomial is going to be created with the terms on the outside of the parenthesis, and then the same binomial inside the parenthesis would be your answer, and that is your answer. Yeah, just remember to use your calculator all the way, and that's it. All right. So number 7 and 8, press pause and try them on your own. Press pause now. Okay, so 7 and 8, you can see right now, pretty much the same factors. It's 3 times 10 here, which is 30, and I got 2 times 15, that equals 17. These are both very easy questions because everything is positive. You see that this is the final answer for number 7, and this is the final answer for number 8. You could pause the page and just look at your work, and hopefully it does match up. We're going to move on to the last two, and I'm going to ask you to pause your page again, pause the video again, and see if you could work on these 2 problems. All right, you can press pause now. So you do 7 times negative 3 is negative 21, so you have to look for factors that multiply to 21 and add to negative 4. Remember, it has to multiply to a negative as well. So negative 4, so this would have to be a positive 3, and this would have to be a negative. All right, so positive 3 times a negative 7 would be a negative 21. Positive 3 minus 7 would be that negative 4. So I found my factors, I have them there, and now I'm just going to rewrite 7w squared. Instead of the negative 4w, I'm going to put a positive 3w, and then minus 7w. And that, again, those 2 terms in the middle there, those like terms, equal negative 4w, and then I'm going to put the minus 3 down. After that, I'm going to look for my greatest common factors. So I have my greatest common factor as w for that first half. Let me see what I'm doing here. So I just wanted to make sure you understand that I am just getting the greatest common factor of these first 2 terms, and then I'll get the greatest common factor of these 2 terms here. So w is the greatest common factor between 7w squared and 3w. So what times w equals 7w squared? 7w. And then what times w equals 3w? And that's just 3. And between these two, there's really no greatest common factor in there. So I'm going to put a 1 on the outside, and then I'm just going to go through the same motion. Negative 1 times what equals negative 7w. Negative 1 times positive 7w. And then negative 1 times what equals negative 3. And that would have to be a positive 3. And you notice that you still have the same terms in the inside the parentheses. So we're talking w minus 1, make the first binomial of the two terms that are outside the parentheses, and then the terms that are inside the parentheses, that creates a binomial as well, and you have your answer. And that's it. All right, so to go on with the number 10, and the last one is 4 times negative 15 first. So that's what I'm going to do. And that is negative 60. All right, so negative 60. So you have to look for terms that multiply to negative 60 and that add to positive 4. So I'm going to do 1 times 60. Nope, that doesn't make 4. 2 times 30, not even close. So now I'm going to say, all right, wait a minute. 2. So now I know maybe 3 goes in, right? 3 times what? 3 times 20. If you didn't know that, just use a calculator. 3 times 20 make 4? No. Does 4 go in? Yes, it does. 4 times 15. 5 goes in as well, right? So if you ever get confused, go ahead. 60 divided by 5. Alrighty, 5 times 12. I'm still not there because I can't make 4 from any of those numbers. Then I know that 60 is 6 times 10. I could make 4. See, I mean, you make that list and you will get to the factors that work out. And basically those factors right there, 6 and 10, that those work out, and you can go ahead and actually use them because those are your factors. All right, so let's see. You have to multiply to a negative, so one of them has to be negative, one of them has to be positive, and then you have to add to a positive 4. So this would have to be negative, and this would have to be positive. Negative 6 plus 10, all right, would be a positive 4. And negative 6 times 10 would be a negative 60. So you bring down the 4x squared. You bring the negative 6x into it, because those are your factors. Then you add the 10x, and that will equal 4x if you combine those like terms, and then you minus the 15. You bring that 15 down. So go ahead, set up your parentheses, and you have to look for greatest common factor between the first two terms only. So 2 goes into both of those, and so does x. So you're looking at the greatest common factor of 2x, and then 2x times what equals 4x. 2x times 2x equals 4x squared, sorry. And then minus 2 times what, 2x times what equals 6x. 2x times negative 3 equals a negative 6x. Okay. All right, so you go ahead and you bring down that addition sign, and you're going to look for greatest common factor between 10x and negative 15, and that is 5. right? So now 5 times what equals 10x? Positive 5 times positive 2x equals 10x. And you notice that you have the same thing there. And then positive 5 times what equals negative 15? Negative 3. So you have everything set up. Now you could go ahead and get your final answer. You use the 2x plus 5 as your first binomial because those are outside of the parentheses. And then you have the 2x minus 3. Oh my goodness. All right, there we go. And those are your answers. Right? Factor by grouping, very important. Um, Take a look at your answers. Take a look at the, once you get the hang of it, it looks difficult, but then all of a sudden it becomes rather easy once you get everything, um, you know, once you get the steps down and everything that you have to do. The most difficult thing is to look for the factors. All right. But if you make a list like this, you will get to the factors. All right. You will get to them. Um, so that's basically it. Hope that helped you out. And maybe we'll do another video for the homework that is due. And I'll see you next time.